everyone, and welcome. I'm Jennifer, and you are listening to the Ego Next Door podcast. Today, I will start telling you about my first romantic relationship that turned out to be very abusive and lasted 7 years. This might help you get a greater understanding of how a toxic relationship might develop, and in which the general behavioral patterns might actually sound quite familiar to you now or in the future. The year was 2012. And I had just had a huge epiphany of what I really wanted my life to be like in the future. I had always dreamt of being in a relationship, as I was almost 19 years old and had barely even kissed a boy before. I hadn't been in a rush to actually get involved with someone, especially because I was afraid of being physical with another human being, let alone a boy. For me, physical contact meant forced hugs in public and slaps in the face in private. For me, love meant a lot of self-sacrifice and plans to rescue someone from their own troubles while drowning in mine. That had been the love I had experienced and witnessed others give to each other, so it was either that or a Romeo and Juliet kind of love, where all the obstacles in the way increase the intensity of desire as well as the possibilities of survival. However, after so many heartbreaks due to unrequited love that were the result of me falling absolutely head over heels with any guy that was mildly nice to me, I had decided that I had a new goal in life. I went from wanting to get married by 23 and having my first child by 27 to wanting to become an independent young lady, eager to meet new friends, finally have the social life I did not get to have during my teenage years, and pretty much reinvent myself. That plan lasted for about 3 months, until I became the new target of a narcissistic sociopath and my mother's new favorite accomplice. Now, how did that come to fruition? I worked for my mother's and stepfather's coffee shop in a village in the middle of nowhere from the moment I finished high school, and they had decided to become the sole owners of that coffee shop that had previously been a shared ownership with 2 of my uncles. I had a gap year between high school and my first year of university, because my parents had refused to support me studying away from home. And once I realized that wouldn't be a possibility, the college application deadlines had already been over. So, I used this gap year to work and to decide if there was any major at the university closest to home that could interest me. I decided to apply for a languages and publishing course since I enjoyed languages and was also interested in the book industry. However, my interest had always been studying psychology, which wasn't a possibility because I hadn't completed my full high school education in that country and didn't have the prerequisites to apply for that major. So, during that gap year, I was pretty much broke. I was already 18 years old at the time. My mother had cut me off financially, yet expected me to work at the coffee shop for free, which I did. The reason I did was because I was afraid that if I refused to help out by working there, I would get kicked out of the house and left for dead in the middle of nowhere. The fact that they called it helping out and not free labor also made me feel like it was an obligation, and that if I denied working because I would like to stay on campus a bit longer to hang out with my classmates or go out for a bit, I was making life harder for my parents, hence feel guilty. This seems to be a popular narcissistic parental tactic, using fog, fear, obligation, and guilt to incite guilt that often causes their children to give in while sacrificing their own fundamental rights and needs. So the year after that, once I got into college, I was able to manage any purchases that I had to make by using the 1,000 euros per year won in a scholarship. I had to fend for myself every year through college with that amount while working for them in this coffee shop. I keep mentioning the coffee shop because this is where I met the person that would become my first real boyfriend, and he lived right next door. On one fine afternoon, while I was working there, he just showed up randomly with a friend and tried to say something flirty, which I totally rolled my eyes at because I was not interested in him. He had this strange aura about him, and I remember commenting with a mutual friend of ours that I hadn't liked the way he approached me, and found it extremely disrespectful. And so, a few days later, he showed up again to apologize for his conduct. This, of course, was a class manipulative act. Narcissists' ability to play nice can often make them appear very proper and polite. So, later that week, he added me on Facebook. At the time, I was quite antisocial and suspicious of anyone trying to interact with me. So when I received that friend request, I messaged him asking if I knew him. He gave me the absolute most ridiculous and cringe-worthy response ever. "You don't know me, but you could get to know me." I let him know how cringe I thought that was and how uninterested I was. He took it so well and seemed to have such a kind approach to any of my twisted responses that I started thinking that maybe I had misjudged him. However, I wasn't interested in pursuing anything romantic with anybody, so I let him know that and told him that I was focusing on my studies and therefore I was not going to continue texting him. I must have commented when I was going to have tests, because conveniently enough, the day after the test, he texted me asking how it went. I thought that was quite sensible of him, and so I started interacting with him on a friendly basis a little bit more. Again, narcissism, working extra hard to appear attentive and generous so they can slowly make you put your guard down. Then, one day, he started calling me and saying that he wanted to hear my voice, which felt very intense at the time, and I felt so uncomfortable, so I told him no. He kept up the intensity, saying things that just seemed very much like love bombing, and I felt so uneasy that I just told him straight up that I was sorry, but I was really not interested in pursuing anything and that I felt extremely uncomfortable. Again, I should have listened to my intuition that was screaming. If it feels like a lot, it probably is a lot. That was a lesson I learned. Also, let's remember that I was only 18 years old at the time, so when he started saying that he felt really sad, that he was always friend-zoned by girls that he was interested in, and that no one gave him a real shot to actually get to know him, and that it depressed him so much and made him feel like being a good person in this world isn't worth it, I failed to realize that this was emotional blackmail. So I felt bad for him and picked up the phone. Even after what was a 3-hour-long conversation on the phone, I still felt this strange discomfort in the pit of my stomach. There was nothing, no connection, nothing that pulled me towards him. Quite the contrary. I felt an unseen force pushing me away. And so, because I didn't really have any close friends I could talk to about this, I consulted my mother. This was my greatest mistake. She proceeded to tell me that if I keep having this judgmental attitude with people and not giving them a chance when they are interested in me, that I'm just going to end up alone, and that it isn't even normal that I'm 18 years old and I never had a boyfriend. This was actually kind of ironic, considering that I didn't even have a social life before 18 years old, because she didn't allow me to have a social life. But I was naive back then, and due to the years of brainwashing, I would just take her words in without questioning it. And so, because I felt so guilty and wrong, I thought maybe I should force myself into giving him a chance, and if things kept feeling off, I would just jump off the boat. After all, it was just a friendship and a few phone calls. What wrong could that do? Little did I know that lifting that boundary resulted in more heartache and abuse. Little did I know that this is how he would gain a foothold into the idealization phase of narcissistic abuse. On the next episode, I will continue sharing my story of how I began dating a narcissist and going into the nitty-gritty of the idealization phase in a part 2 of 7 Years Astray. Thank you for listening to the Ego Next Door podcast. See you soon, and I hope you have a wonderful day. If you enjoyed today's episode and would like to hear more, don't forget to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel at Ego Next Door. And if you would like to support my work, consider becoming a patron to my Patreon creator page at Jennifer Hachia. The Ego Next Door podcast is presented solely for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. The content here is not intended to serve as a substitute for the consultation, diagnosis, or medical treatment of a qualified healthcare provider. Reliance on any information provided here is at your own risk. If you or someone you know is in crisis or experiencing suicidal thoughts, please reach out immediately to someone who can help right away. Call your national emergency services or go to the nearest hospital.